Most people say they want respect, but almost no one lives in a way that actually creates it. They want to be heard. They want to be taken seriously. They want their presence to matter. What they really want, though, is comfort. And comfort is the fastest way to lose respect. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Respect is not a personality trait. It's not confidence. It's not charisma. And it's definitely not something you can demand. Respect is a response. A response to patterns, to behavior, to what you tolerate and what you refuse to tolerate. The reason so many people feel invisible in conversations, meetings, and relationships is not because they lack value, but because they are constantly sending signals they don't even realize they're sending. If you've ever felt like people interrupt you, talk over you, ignore your ideas, or only acknowledge your point after someone else repeats it, this isn't bad luck. And it's not because you're incapable or inexperienced. It's because respect is built before the moment you speak, not during it. By the time you open your mouth, people have already decided how seriously they're going to take you. Most people don't want to hear this, but authority is rarely lost in big dramatic moments. It's lost quietly through small decisions that seem harmless in the moment. It's lost when you say yes instead of no, when you stay silent instead of clarifying. And in a few minutes, you're going to understand exactly why that happens. Not in theory, not in motivational language, but in behaviors you can actually observe and control. Because the truth is, most people sabotage their own authority every single day without noticing it. Now, let's begin. Respect is built quietly. It's built in moments no one applauds, in decisions no one sees, in standards you keep, even when it costs you something. Most people think respect comes from being impressive, from being loud, from being visible. It doesn't. It comes from being predictable in the right ways, predictable in your values, predictable in your follow-through, predictable in what you allow and what you don't. That's why two people can say the exact same sentence and only one of them gets taken seriously. The difference isn't the words, it's the history behind them. People don't listen to what you say. They listen to what your behavior has taught them to expect. This is where things get uncomfortable. If people don't respect you, it's usually not because they're bad people or intentionally trying to diminish you. It's because your behavior has trained them not to. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've been unclear. Unclear about your standards, unclear about your boundaries, unclear about what you expect from yourself first. And the world always responds to clarity. One of the most common mistakes people make is confusing being liked with being respected. They believe that if they're agreeable enough, flexible enough, easy enough to deal with, respect will eventually follow. It doesn't. What follows is familiarity. And familiarity kills authority. When people feel they can cross lines with you, adjust you, or dismiss you without consequence, they stop taking you seriously. Not consciously, but instinctively. You've seen this happen before. Someone who always says yes, always adapts, always understands. At first, everyone likes them, and then, slowly, no one listens. They become background noise, not because they lack value, but because they never protected it. They trained everyone around them that their standards were negotiable. Here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. The desire to be liked feels harmless, but it quietly trains you to betray yourself. Every time you choose approval over alignment, you send a signal. And over Chimie, those signals stack. They become your reputation. In the next section, we're going to break down why approval is one of the most expensive habits you can have, and how it slowly strips away your authority without you noticing. Once you see it clearly, you won't unsee it. And if this perspective already feels uncomfortably accurate, that's not a bad sign. It means you're paying attention. Stay with it. The next part changes how you see every interaction. Being liked feels safe. It feels natural. For most people, it feels like the right thing to pursue. From a very early age, approval becomes a kind of currency. You learn quickly that being agreeable keeps things smooth, that fitting in avoids conflict, and that saying the right thing at the right time earns acceptance. Over time, this conditioning becomes automatic, and most people never question it. The problem is that approval comes with a cost, and that cost is almost never paid up front. It's paid slowly, through compromise. It's paid in moments where you choose what feels comfortable instead of what feels aligned. And the reason this is dangerous is because it doesn't feel like self-betrayal when it's happening. It feels like maturity. It feels like flexibility. It feels like being easy to work with. But what's actually happening is simpler than most people want to admit. Every time you prioritize being liked, you delay the development of respect. You tolerate behavior you wouldn't choose for yourself, not because you believe in it, but because you don't want to create friction. And slowly, without a single dramatic moment, your authority erodes. Most people think authority is something you turn on in important situations. It isn't. Authority is something you build long before those moments arrive. It's built in casual conversations, in small decisions, and in the way you respond when something feels off, but inconvenient to address. When you consistently avoid those moments, people learn something about you. They learn that your standards are flexible, that your boundaries are negotiable, and that your discomfort is easy to ignore. This is why approval is so expensive. It trains people how to treat you, not through what you say, but through what you allow. When you stay quiet to keep the peace, you're not being neutral. You're communicating that peace matters more than clarity. When you laugh something off that bothers you, you're not being easygoing. You're signaling that your limits can be tested without consequence. Most people don't realize how early this pattern starts. It often begins in environments where you don't feel fully secure. New jobs, new social groups, new relationships. You want to fit in, so you adapt. You downplay parts of yourself. At first, it seems strategic. But if you stay in that mode too long, it becomes your default. And once that happens, people stop seeing you as someone with a clear position. They see you as someone who adjusts. Adjustment creates comfort. It does not create respect. This is where many people get confused. They assume that being respected means being intimidating, rigid, or cold. It doesn't. Respect doesn't come from force. It comes from coherence, from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will not compromise on, and then behaving in a way that reflects that consistently. Approval seeking disrupts that coherence because it pulls your behavior away from your values and toward other people's reactions. There's a subtle shift that happens when someone prioritizes being liked for too long. They stop making decisions based on internal standards and start making them based on external feedback. What will this person think? How will this be received? Will this upset someone? Over time, those questions replace a much more important one. Is this aligned with who I want to be? When that internal reference point disappears, authority disappears with it. People can sense this, even if they can't articulate it. They may not consciously think, this person lacks self-respect, but they feel it. They feel the hesitation. They feel the inconsistency. And instinctively, they stop taking that person seriously, not out of malice, but out of pattern recognition. Humans are constantly scanning for stability, and approval-seeking behavior signals instability. This is why being liked often leads to being overlooked. When everyone is comfortable around you, but no one defers to you, that's not a coincidence. It's the outcome of repeated micro-decisions where comfort was chosen over clarity. And once that pattern is established, it doesn't break on its own. Waiting longer only reinforces it. What makes this especially difficult is that approval seeking is often rewarded in the short term. People smile. Conversations stay light. Conflict is avoided. On the surface, things feel good, but underneath, something important is missing. There's no weight behind your presence. No expectation that your words carry consequence. And without that expectation, respect cannot form. This doesn't mean you need to become confrontational or disagree for the sake of it. It means you need to stop abandoning your position to manage other people's emotions. It means accepting that not everyone will like you and that this is not a failure. In fact, it's often a sign that you're finally becoming clear enough to be taken seriously. The turning point for most people comes when they realize that respect and approval rarely grow at the same pace. One often slows the other down. And if you don't consciously choose which one you're prioritizing, the default will always be approval. Because it's easier. Because it feels safer. Because it avoids short-term discomfort. But the long-term cost is significant. When you consistently choose to be liked, you teach people that your standards are optional. When you choose alignment instead, you begin sending a different signal, one that doesn't need to be announced. One that becomes visible through behavior alone. In the next section, we're going to talk about one of the clearest ways people either reinforce or destroy that signal over time. It has nothing to do with talent, personality, or intention. It has to do with consistency. And once you understand how consistency shapes trust and authority, you'll start seeing exactly why some people are relied on and others are quietly bypassed. Consistency is one of the most misunderstood traits when it comes to respect. Most people think it's about discipline, motivation, or willpower. In reality, consistency is a signal, and like all signals, it teaches people how to relate to you over time. Anyone can show up once. Anyone can make a strong first impression. Anyone can be impressive for a short period. That's not what builds respect. Respect is built when your behavior becomes predictable in a way that lowers uncertainty for other people. When they know what to expect from you, they relax. When they don't, they compensate. Most people don't notice when inconsistency starts to cost them credibility because it rarely looks dramatic. It looks like missed follow-ups, delayed responses, promises made with good intentions but weak execution. You fully mean to do the thing, but you don't. And when that happens enough times, something shifts, not emotionally, but structurally. People stop relying on you. They don't announce it. They don't confront you. They simply adjust. They double-check. They remind you, or worse, they stop involving you altogether. And from the outside, it can feel confusing. You may still be working hard. You may still care. You may even feel overwhelmed. But none of that changes the signal your behavior is sending. Inconsistent behavior forces other people to carry extra cognitive load. They have to remember to follow up. They have to create backup plans. They have to manage around you. And once someone experiences that pattern, their trust recalibrates. They stop expecting reliability. And without reliability, respect has no foundation. This is why inconsistency is so damaging in professional environments. It doesn't just affect outcomes. It affects perception. When someone consistently does what they say, they egoing to do their words gain weight. When someone only follows through sometimes, their words lose value. Over time, people stop listening, not because they don't like you, but because listening to you has stopped being efficient. Most people don't realize this is happening until they start getting bypassed. Decisions get made without them. Opportunities go elsewhere. Important conversations happen in rooms they're no longer invited into. And when they finally notice, the instinct is to ask for more trust, more responsibility, more opportunity. But trust doesn't work that way. It isn't granted because you want it. It's extended because your past behavior made it feel safe. What makes this frustrating is that inconsistency often comes from overcommitment, not laziness. People say yes too often. They underestimate how long things will take. They believe they'll figure it out later. And in the moment, saying yes feels productive. It feels cooperative. But every commitment you don't honor weakens your credibility, regardless of the reason. Consistency isn't about doing everything. It's about doing what you commit to. If you don't intend to follow through, the most respectful move is to say no. Most people think saying no damages relationships. In reality, unreliable yeses do far more damage over time. A clear no preserves trust. An inconsistent yes erodes it. The people who earn respect understand this intuitively. They protect their word. They don't promise what they can't deliver, and when they do commit, they follow through, even when it's inconvenient. Not because they enjoy it, but because they understand that reliability compounds. One follow-up doesn't change much. 6 months of consistent follow-up changes everything. This is how predictability becomes power. When people know they can count on you, they stop monitoring you. They stop questioning you. They give you more autonomy, and autonomy is one of the clearest markers of respect. You don't get autonomy by asking for it. You earn it by proving, over time, that you can be trusted without supervision. Inconsistent people rarely see themselves clearly. They focus on effort instead of outcome. They think, I tried, or I meant to, or I had a lot going on. But effort is invisible to everyone else. All that's visible is what happened or didn't happen. Respect responds to results, not intentions. There's also a deeper cost to inconsistency that most people ignore. Every time you break your own word, even privately, you weaken yourself. You start doubting yourself. You hesitate before committing. You over-explain. And that internal uncertainty leaks into how others perceive you. Confidence isn't just about believing in yourself. It's about knowing you can rely on your own behavior. This is why small, boring consistency is so powerful. Doing what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, without needing recognition, without needing motivation. Over time, this creates a reputation that speaks for you before you enter the room. People trust the pattern, not the promise. If you want to know how much respect you currently have, don't look at how people treat you when you're present. Look at what happens when you're not. Are decisions paused until you're consulted, or do they move on without you? That answer is shaped almost entirely by consistency. In the next section, we're going to talk about boundaries and why consistency alone isn't enough if you don't protect your standards. Because even reliable people can lose respect if they allow the wrong behavior to persist around them. Once you understand how boundaries function as a form of silent communication, you'll see exactly why some people command respect without ever raising their voice. Boundaries are one of the clearest signals of self-respect, yet they're also one of the most avoided, not because people don't believe in boundaries, but because enforcing them creates discomfort. And most people would rather live with long-term frustration than short-term tension. The problem is that boundaries you dare to enforce aren't boundaries at all. They're suggestions. Most people think boundaries are about rules you explain to others. In reality, boundaries are about behavior you consistently respond to. You don't need long conversations. You don't need justifications. You don't need to convince anyone. People learn your boundaries by watching what happens when they cross them. This is where many people go wrong. They set boundaries intellectually, but abandon them emotionally. They tell themselves they won't tolerate certain behavior, but when it happens, they hesitate. They rationalize. They minimize. They tell themselves it's not worth the conflict. And in doing so, they send a very clear message. This behavior is acceptable. Respect doesn't respond to what you say you value. It responds to what you protect. Every environment you're in is shaped by the standards you enforce. If you allow disrespect, it becomes normal. If you tolerate inconsistency, it becomes expected. If you excuse behavior that undermines you, it becomes embedded. And once a pattern becomes embedded, changing it requires far more effort than setting it correctly in the first place. This is why boundaries function as a form of silent communication. You don't need to announce them. People feel them. They sense what's allowed and what's not through consequences, not conversations. When there are no consequences, there is no boundary. There is only noise. One of the most difficult aspects of boundaries is that the people most likely to violate them are often the people closest to you. Familiarity creates entitlement. Long history creates assumptions. People believe they could say more, take more, or cross more because they've always been there. And this is where many people freeze. They confuse boundaries with rejection. They worry that enforcing a boundary means being cruel, disloyal, or ungrateful. It doesn't. It means being clear. There's a hard truth most people only learn after years of frustration. Removing people who consistently disrespect your boundaries rarely makes your life worse. It usually makes it quieter, more focused, and more stable. The fear is that everything will fall apart. The reality is that things often improve. Energy returns. Clarity returns. Momentum returns. Boundaries don't just protect you from others. They protect you from becoming someone you don't respect. Every time you allow behavior that violates your standards, you create internal friction. You feel it as resentment, exhaustion, or disengagement. Over time, that internal conflict becomes visible. People may not know what's wrong, but they feel the lack of alignment. This is why boundaries must be enforced consistently, not emotionally. You don't enforce them when you're angry. You enforce them when they're tested. Calmly. Predictably. Without drama. The goal isn't to punish. It's to clarify. When people understand that certain behaviors always lead to the same outcome, they adjust. Not because you demanded it, but because the pattern is clear. Many people avoid boundaries because they believe it will limit their opportunities. They think saying no will close doors. In reality, weak boundaries close far more doors than strong ones. When people don't know where you stand, they don't trust you with responsibility. They don't involve you in important decisions. They don't rely on you in high-stakes situations. Clarity attracts trust. Ambiguity repels it. There's also a difference between boundaries and control. Boundaries define your behavior, not someone else's. You don't tell people what they must do. You decide what you will tolerate and what you will remove yourself from. That distinction matters. Control creates resistance. Boundaries create structure. Strong boundaries also act as a filter. They naturally remove people who benefit from your lack of clarity and attract people who respect structure. This is why people who enforce boundaries often end up with fewer relationships at first, but better ones over time. Quantity decreases. Quality increases. And respect grows in that environment. If you've struggled with being taken seriously, it's worth asking yourself a simple question. What behavior have I been tolerating that I shouldn't have? The answer to that question is often uncomfortable, but it's also revealing, because the fastest way to change how people treat you is not to demand respect, but to stop allowing disrespect. In the next section, we're going to talk about competence, skill, and results, because boundaries create structure, but skill creates leverage. And once you understand how mastering one area changes how people respond to you, you'll see why respect accelerates when proof replaces potential. Boundaries create structure, but structure alone doesn't generate influence. Respect accelerates when structure is paired with competence. This is where many people get stuck. They work hard, they show up consistently, they protect their standards, and yet they still feel overlooked. The missing piece is often simple, but uncomfortable to face. They haven't become undeniable at anything. Most people want respect for who they are. The world responds to what you produce. Effort, intention, and character matter, but they are not visible at scale. Results. Ari. Respect grows when your presence makes an environment measurably better. When outcomes improve because you're there, your value stops being a debate. This is why skill is leverage, not vague ability, not potential. Skill that produces proof. Proof removes subjectivity. It shifts conversations from opinions to outcomes. Once proof exists, respect no longer needs to be negotiated. It becomes practical. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to be good at too many things at once. They spread their energy thin, hoping that versatility will make them valuable. In reality, it makes them replaceable. General competence keeps you involved. Specialized competence makes you essential. When you are clearly strong in one area, people know exactly why they need you. Leverage comes from focus. When you choose one domain and pursue mastery deliberately, you compress uncertainty. People trust specialists because specialists reduce risk. They don't need you to explain why you matter. The results explain it for you. This is why mastering one skill often changes how people treat you across every area of your life, not just the one you focused on. Many people confuse being busy with being effective. They measure progress by hours spent instead of outcomes produced. But respect doesn't respond to activity. It responds to impact. You can work non-stop and still be ignored if nothing changes because of your work. On the other hand, someone who produces clear results with less noise quickly becomes influential. Proof also protects you. When your value is visible, criticism loses power. Opinions lose weight. You don't need to defend yourself because the evidence speaks first. This is why people who lack proof often rely on explanation, justification, or credentials. They talk more because they have less to point to. People with proof speak less. Another uncomfortable truth is that mastery requires time. And most people quit too early. They jump from skill to skill, strategy to strategy, hoping something will finally work. What they're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of depth. Mastery is repetitive. It's boring. It's often invisible at first, and that's why so few people commit to it. When you stay with one thing long enough, something shifts. Patterns become obvious. Problems become predictable. Your confidence stops being emotional and becomes structural. You don't feel confident because you're motivated. You feel confident because you know exactly what to do and why it works. That confidence is felt by others immediately. This is also where respect compounds. Once people see that you can deliver in one area, they start trusting you in others. Not because you asked for it, but because competence transfers credibility. You don't need to announce your growth. It becomes apparent through how people involve you, consult you, and defer to you. Skill also changes your relationship with boundaries and consistency. When you are good at something, you are less tempted to open. You understand your capacity. You protect your time. You choose commitments more carefully. This reinforces the signals you've already been sending. Reliability, clarity, and proof start working together. Most people underestimate how much respect changes when they stop chasing recognition and start building evidence. Recognition is fragile. It depends on mood, politics, and perception. Evidence is stable. It exists whether people like you or not. And once evidence accumulates, respect becomes less about personality and more about utility. If you want to be taken seriously, ask yourself a difficult question. What can I point to that clearly improved because of me? Not what I tried. Not what I intended. What changed? If that answer is vague, the solution isn't to demand more respect. It's to narrow your focus and deepen your skill until the answer becomes obvious. In the next section, we're going to talk about the final piece most people misunderstand: why actions ultimately matter more than opinions, and why chasing external validation is unnecessary once your standards, consistency, boundaries, and proof are aligned. This is where everything comes together. Achi saw me point: if you stay consistent, protect your boundaries, and build real skill, something unexpected happens. You realize that not everyone will respect you, and more importantly, you realize that this no longer matters. Most people waste an enormous amount of energy trying to correct how they are perceived. They explain themselves. They defend their decisions. They replay conversations in their head, wondering what they should have said differently. What they're really doing is giving opinions power they don't deserve. Opinions are cheap. They fluctuate with mood, insecurity, and projection. Respect built on opinion is fragile because it depends on constant maintenance. The moment you stop performing for it, it disappears. This is why people who rely on external validation never feel settled. They are always adjusting, always scanning reactions, always calibrating themselves to the room. Actions work differently. Actions don't argue. They don't negotiate. They accumulate. When your behavior is aligned over time, it creates a record. That record speaks before you do. People may not like you. They may disagree with you. They may even underestimate you, but they cannot ignore what consistently produces results. This is where many people get stuck emotionally. They believe that if they just worked harder, explained more clearly, or proved themselves one last time, others would finally acknowledge them. What they don't see is that chasing acknowledgement keeps them dependent. It keeps their sense of worth externally anchored, and that dependence is visible. People respect those who don't need permission to act. When you stop reacting to disrespect and start responding with behavior, something shifts. You don't correct people verbally. You correct patterns structurally. You change what you participate in. You change what you invest energy into. You change what you tolerate. And over Chimi, the environment adjusts. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent or detached. It means becoming grounded. You know your standards. You know your capacity. You know what you're building. And because of that clarity, opinions lose their grip. They become information at best, noise at worst. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing how you show up regardless of who's watching. You don't need witnesses. You don't need applause. You don't need agreement. That internal alignment creates stability, and stability is deeply attractive. People trust those who trust themselves enough to keep moving without reassurance. Many people misunderstand this and assume that respected individuals are immune to criticism. They're not. They're simply not ruled by it. They don't collapse under it, and they don't overcorrect because of it. They evaluate feedback, keep what's useful, discard what isn't, and continue forward. This is why arguments rarely produce respect. They may win a moment, but they lose the pattern. Respect is rarely granted in debate. It's granted in hindsight. People look back and realize who consistently delivered, who stayed steady, and who didn't need validation to act with integrity. Another difficult truth is that some people will only respect you once they no longer have access to you. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop chasing understanding, when you stop trying to be seen correctly, distance clarifies value. Not because you've disappeared, but because your absence exposed your contribution. This is why self-respect is the foundation of all other forms of respect. When you respect your own standards, time, and effort, it shows. You don't need to announce it. It appears in how you speak, how you decide, and how you move forward. People may not articulate it, but they feel it. Actions outlive opinions, because opinions are momentary. Actions leave trails. They shape environments. They influence outcomes. And over Chimi, they defined reputation far more accurately than any explanation ever could. In the final section, we're going to bring everything together. Not with motivation, not with hype, but with a clear understanding of how respect is built slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly over time. And why, once you stop chasing it, it often arrives on its own. By now, one thing should be clear. Respect is not something you demand, announce, or negotiate. It's something that forms slowly when your behavior stays aligned long enough for people to stop questioning it. Most people think respect arrives as a moment, a breakthrough, a recognition, a turning point where others suddenly see them differently. That moment almost never exists. What exists instead is accumulation, small decisions repeated consistently, until they create a reputation you no longer need to defend. This is where many people get frustrated. They expect immediate feedback. They expect confirmation. They want signs that what they're doing is working. But respect rarely sends signals while it's being built. It shows up later, often quietly, when you're no longer looking for it. Respect is built when you stop explaining yourself and start behaving predictably in alignment with your standards. When your words match your actions, when your actions match your priorities, and when your priorities don't shift just because someone disapproves, this kind of alignment creates something rare. Trust without conversation. People begin to know what to expect from you. They know where you stand. They know what you will and won't tolerate. Not because he told them, but because you showed them over time. And once expectations stabilize, respect has room to grow. One of the most important shifts happens when you stop measuring your progress by how others react. Early on, reactions feel like feedback, but over time, they become distractions. If you constantly scan for approval or rejection, you end up adjusting your behavior too often to build a stable identity. Respected people are not the most liked. They are the most consistent. They don't change tone depending on who's in the room. They don't abandon standards for convenience. They don't overextend to prove worth. They move steadily, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. This is why respect often follows self-respect, not the other way around. When you respect your own time, your own effort, and your own direction, others pick up on it. They may not consciously recognize it, but they respond to it. You become someone whose presence feels grounded, someone whose decisions feel deliberate, someone whose boundaries feel natural instead of defensive. And those qualities are felt long before they are understood. It's also important to accept that not everyone will ever respect you. Some people benefit from you staying unsure. Some people are uncomfortable when you stop seeking validation. Some people only felt powerful when you were explainable, flexible, or available on demand. Respect costs access. When you raise your standards, you lose proximity with certain people. This is not failure. It's confirmation. You don't need universal approval to move forward. You need internal alignment and the patience to let results compound. Eventually, something subtle happens. You're no longer concerned with being respected. You're focused on doing your work well, protecting what matters, and continuing to grow your skill. And that's usually when respect arrives. Not loudly, not dramatically, but practically. People consult you more. They hesitate before wasting your time. They take your words seriously without you raising your voice. They adjust around you instead of testing you, not because you've demanded it, but because your behavior trained them. This is the final truth. Respect is not an emotion people feel toward you. It's a behavior they adopt around you. And behavior only changes in response to patterns. If there's one thing to take from this, it's this. Stop chasing respect as a reaction. Build it as a consequence. Align your standards. Stay consistent. Develop skill. Let your actions speak longer than your words ever could. Over time, the right people will notice. The wrong ones will fall away, and you'll no longer need to ask whether you're respected, because your environment will already have answered.